Hello there everyone, it is Isaac here and I'm just going to be talking today about the January transfer window. This was a video requested in my comments of the Thogdad podcast. So we're just going to have a bit of a discussion. I'm going to go through the whole of the Premier League table, look at who they've brought in, look at who they've got rid of, I'm going to rate them out of 10. Then I'm going to talk more in depth about who I think is going to do well, who I think is going to not do so well, who's going to have the most impact, who is quite surprising. Talk about some of the big stories of the January transfer window. So we'll start with top of the table Arsenal, flying high this season, doing really, really well. At the start of the season, I did not expect Arsenal to be in the position they are from last season. It was a disappointing season for a lot of clubs last season, including my club, Man United. But for Arsenal as well, it was bad. They've started this season really well. Obviously, bringing in Gabriel Jesus and Alexander Zinchenko was the big talk of the summer. And Fabio Vieira, promising talent, maybe not starting at the minute, but he looks like a definite starter in the future for Arsenal. They've then gone and made some big moves again in the January transfer window, bringing in Leandro Trossard from Brighton. Now for 20 mil, this is an absolute steal. I watched him in the FA Cup game against City, and he was just a bright spark. He just wanted to run at players, something that Martinelli does, but if you can have another player that does a similar thing, we've seen with Martinelli it works. If you can bring a player to play in that similar style, in case of injury or just to give Martinelli a rest, he's played a lot of games this season, you're going to need to rest players. Leandro Trossard looks like a really good player. Obviously, he had a little bit of a bad end to his Brighton career when he publicly came out and said he wanted to leave, which is fair enough. He's got big ambitions, but, the way he handled it isn't as good as someone like Moses Caicedo did, where he was honest with the fan and said it's an opportunity that he just can't pass up. They also brought in the young lad Jakub Kiwior. Now, I'll admit I don't know much about this lad from Spezia, 22 mil, so about the same price as Trossard, but slightly more overpriced. They've got him until 2028, so he's definitely a future player. Obviously, William Saliba's been their best centre-back this season. Gabriel's been good, but Saliba's just been another level. And if, their backup options are Rob Holding and Marquinhos, who has obviously gone to Watford, I think, or Norwich, sorry, yeah. But they need backup options, and if this Kiwior lad proves to be a good talent, then for 20 mil again, that's a really good, in this market, 20 mil for a decent centre-back is a good price. They've also brought in Jorginho for 12 million. Now, this one I did not see coming at all. You cannot tell me at the start of the January transfer window any fans thought that Jorginho would be leaving Chelsea to go to Arsenal. Many thought he'd be leaving Chelsea because obviously his contract was up in the summer, but to go to the biggest rivals in Arsenal is quite surprising. And I get why he's done it. I mean, Chelsea aren't performing well this season. He's a little bit in and out of the team. He was their captain, but his performances have been subpar in comparison to recent years, especially when they won the Champions League. And then he's gone to Arsenal. He's in that. He's definitely in the Premier League title race. He's not in the Champions League anymore, but they're going to have a decent run in the Europa League. They're not in any cup competitions. I don't think he's guaranteed starter for them. I think he can be if there's injury or suspension, because we've seen time and time again that Xhaka and Partey are prone to kicking off. But I think he offers something different. Xhaka and Partey are quite happy to sit, and Odegaard goes forward, whereas Jorginho is more of a box-to-box midfielder. But again, 12 mil for an experienced Premier League midfielder, so a Champions League, Euros winner, someone that's went to that Europa League final, where a Europa League winner as well with Chelsea against Arsenal. He can take a good penalty. He's a good passer of the ball. He's not the quickest, but he doesn't need to be. I think he's a really promising talent for Arsenal. An older talent, an experienced talent. Now, in terms of second place, Manchester City, they haven't really brought in many people. They brought in Maximo Perrone, a youngster that will probably just go, a DM that will just go straight into the academy. I can't see him starting over Rodri anytime soon. So yeah, City, they could have brought in some players, but they've got really good squad depth, so it would have just been money wasted when you look in the summer. Mbappe's going to be available. Bellingham's going to be available. Those are two players that City will want. Whether they can get both of them is a completely different question. But they're players that are available, and they're players that they could go for. They could definitely afford them, so I think they'd rather just keep the squad they've got, keep pushing for a fifth Premier League in 6 years. I think they're capable of that, by the way, and they can work from there. I mean, I'm Man United. I'm a little bit disappointed with Man United's transfer window. I was never expecting anything sparkling, but it is just a case of getting the numbers up for United. We brought in Jack Butland on loan from Crystal Palace, just a second choice. With Martin Dubravka being recalled from Newcastle from a lack of game time, we needed a second choice. As good as and experienced as Tom Eaton is, he's not a good enough second choice, unfortunately. So we needed someone experienced in the Premier League. Unfortunately, again, he's not going to get much game time. He won't play in the Carabao Cup final, not a chance. He might play against West Ham in the FA Cup. He probably will. He's not going to play against Barcelona in the Europa League because that's too big a game. If we then get an easier draw in the Europa League, if we beat Barcelona, he will play. I just can't see him getting more than 5 or 6 starts, and that's if we progress further and further into competitions, and barring injury, of course. We also brought in Wout Weghorst from Burnley, again, just getting the numbers up. We needed Martial can't stay fit. Rashford doesn't want to play striker. Garnacho doesn't want to play striker. So we needed an out-and-out striker that we could rely on. There were calls for Anthony Elanga to go play striker. But where we are at the minute, we can't be affording to experimenting with players' positions. We have to be getting the players we need to suit us, not making other players change. It's just difficult where we are at the minute. So we brought in Wout Weghorst, 6'7", did all right at Burnley, then went to Besiktas, obviously after they got relegated because it was in his contract that he wouldn't play in the Championship for them, which is, I think, is a little bit rude, but that's for a different conversation. But Wout Weghorst brings something to United that we haven't had in a long time, which is a tall striker. I mean, I know we had Romelu Lukaku, but he was only 6'1" or 2". He wasn't the tallest. We had Ronaldo, who was good in the air, but again, that controversy and lack of ambition from Ronaldo really killed him off. Wout Weghorst strikes me as a player that wants to beat United. He wants to play in the Premier League. He doesn't want to play out in Turkey. He wants to be at the top, and if he can finish this season, go back to Burnley with a Carabao Cup medal, an FA Cup, and possibly a Europa, which I think are 3 competitions Manchester United could realistically win this season, maybe not the Europa League, that's going to look really good, and it also might attract some money because Kompany will probably want to use him if they get promoted back to the Premier League, but will Wout Weghorst want to stay at Burnley and to do a relegation battle? We also brought in Marcel Sabitzer. Now this was another loan, so 3 loans, no permanent signings, none that I think will be made permanent unless Sabitzer comes in and does really well. But Sabitzer was kind of a desperation signing in that we signed him because of the injury to Christian Eriksen that's going to keep him out till April. And we needed another centre midfielder because we've obviously got Casemiro is really good, Bruno who's doing really well. Fred offers a lot of energy, but not a lot defensively, and he's not very good on the ball. And McTominay is not good enough, in my opinion, for Manchester United. So we needed somebody like an Eriksen type, a carrier of the ball, someone who can hit a shot from range and from close in, can find a pass, can ping a ball. We needed someone to come in and do that role, and I think Sabitzer will be able to do that. Obviously, he's only a loan, so if it doesn't work out, we're not stuck with him. I think it will work out, and I think we will sign him permanently. My prediction. On to Newcastle. Now, they have let Jonjo Shelvey go, which I think is quite interesting. Jonjo Shelvey was a player that I think embodied the Newcastle ethos of hard work gets you far. And they've let him go, which is, I think, we'll get on when I talk about Forest when I get down there, but with Forest, he's gone from pretty much guaranteed European football to a relegation fight with Newcastle. And at the stages of his career, he's getting into his 30s. He doesn't need game time. He needs to be playing at the highest possible level. Newcastle is the highest possible level. With Nottingham Forest, he'll be lucky if he stays up, but he'll get guaranteed game time. With Newcastle, he might not get every single start, but he'll be in that squad, pushing for trophies, bringing the football back to the fans, as it were. They also brought in Anthony Gordon from Everton. Promising young lad. Obviously, last time Everton did play Newcastle, there was a bit of a kick-off. But I think, again, he offers Newcastle something different. He offers Newcastle pace on the counter-attack, something which Callum Wilson doesn't necessarily have bundles of, but they do have in Saint-Maximin. He offers youth. He offers a good pass of the ball. And again, he's done the opposite of Anthony Gordon. He's gone from avoiding the relegation battle with Everton to possible Champions League football next season with Everton, if not European football. They also extended Loris Karius' contract, and that is all Newcastle got up to in the window. So good window for Newcastle. Not the best, not the worst, but they got what needed to be done. Now Tottenham Hotspur, again, were a little bit quiet. They brought in Arnaut Danjuma. Now this was quite a surprising one, wasn't it? Because they looked at Arnaut Danjuma was all but signed for Everton. He was messaging back Everton fans saying, "Yeah, I'm going to come and help your club. I'm going to give everything in the blue, up the toffees, all that talk." And then he's gone. He was alone, but he said he was going to help them stay up. And then Tottenham came in, offered more money, or offered a higher place position, better football, and he went there, which shows he does have more ambition. But when you say those kind of things about going to Everton, you've got to stick to your word. And he just didn't, which is quite disappointing, really, because I did like the look of him for Villarreal. We played them last season in the Champions League, and he looked really, really good. And I think he could have offered a lot to Everton, especially with Anthony Gordon going. I know Anthony Gordon plays on the wing and down the middle, but they can still play that similar role of just getting forward and putting balls in the back of the net, which is what Everton need, really. But I think it's disappointing from Danjuma. They also brought in Pedro Porro, the young right wing back from Sporting, promising youngster. Got some Champions League appearances, Europa League appearances under his belt. Gets into the Portugal team, and I think obviously Matt Doherty's gone to Madrid. To Jed Spence, they've loaned to Middlesbrough. They don't have that much cover in the right back position. They've got Jeffrey Tandanga, but I don't think he's good enough. So bringing in a right back makes sense for Spurs, and I'm sure Antonio Conte will be very happy with that signing. On to Brighton. Brighton have brought in Yassin Ayari from AIK, Jamie Mullins from Bohemian, Facundo Bonononte from Rosario, and that is all they did this January transfer window. So they brought in 2 permanents and a loan. Not many amazing signings. I mean, they very nearly did lose Moise Caicedo to Chelsea or Arsenal, which would have been a massive hit for Brighton. I mean, they are in 6th at the minute, and Caicedo's been massive for them this season. He's been someone that they can rely on for goals, assists, a progressor of the ball, defensive work. I mean, I know he came out and said that he publicly wanted to go, but apologies. He said he wanted to go, which is all well and good, but you've got to think of the team. You've got to think, is this the right thing to be doing? And I bet they're glad that they can keep him till January. I think he will go in the summer. Time will tell for that one. Next is Brentford. Just pull up the... So again, they've only brought in Kevin Schade from Freiburg. Paid less than £1 million for him. Young right mid. Looks like a good lad. They've only got him on loan, so again, like I say, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But Brentford do need some more squad depth. Obviously, Ivan Toney's been good, and Buemo's been good, Damsgaard has been good, but you get an injury to one of them, and so all of a sudden they start slipping down the table because they're not getting the goals in the same consistency that they were. I think that's a good move from Brentford. They could have brought in a couple more players. I do remember reading, I can't remember exactly who it was, but they were looking at bringing in a couple more players. But they just were not able to get those over the line. But sitting pretty in 7th at Brentford, which is good for the squad they've got. And I think with more sidings, they maybe could have... I think they'll drop down to the second half of the table, 11th and below. I think if they'd have brought in some more players, that would have been a different story. On to Fulham. They brought in Cedric Suarez from Arsenal. Was never going to get in the team. Ben White's been impeccable at right back this season, and Tomiyasu's a really good second option. So he wasn't going to get much game time for Arsenal unless he changed his position to maybe centre back, which I know he can play, but it's not his preferred position. So Cedric Suarez going to follow makes sense. Obviously they've got Mbabu, but I do think he's injured at the minute. Let's have a look. No, he's not. But anyway, it gives Fulham a different option in that he is more experienced than Mbabu. He's Premier League proven. He's played in the Premier League. So I think he can offer a lot for Fulham. Again, they're doing really well this season in 8th. Do I think they'll finish there? No, I think they'll finish bottom half of the table. But again, 11th to 15th sort of range, which I think is a good season for Fulham, who were for the longest time almost a yo-yo club. I think that's 11th to 15th place finish. You told Fulham at the start of the season that's what they're going to get. They would absolutely bite your hand off there and then. Now on to Chelsea, the biggest spenders. Now Chelsea just were throwing money around like it was nobody business. Todd Boehly has come in, and obviously Chelsea fans really did like Roman Abramovich while he was there at Chelsea. And he wants to maybe replicate that by just throwing money at the club, which doesn't always work. Excuse me if this takes us to about 25 minutes while I read out this list. So we've got Benoit Badiashile from Monaco, Andres Santos from Vasco da Gama, João Felix on loan from Atletico Madrid, Mikhailo Mudryk from Shakhtar Donetsk, Noni Madueke from PSV Eindhoven, Malo Gusto from Lyon, and Enzo Fernandez to Benfica. Now, again, this is going to shock you. Enzo Fernandez is on a loan, is on a permanent for British record fee of 104 million till June 2031. Malo Gusto is there till June 2030. Madueke is there till June 2030. Mikhailo Mudryk, June 2031. João Felix is on loan, so he'll go in the summer, but I think that'll become permanent. They don't know about Andres Santos because he's not coming on a permanent. And Benoit Badiashile is there till June 2030. Now you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the 7 signings for the 600 million they've spent are there until at least 2030 or 2031. Now that to me is ridiculous. That's 7 years that those players will be there. I mean, Enzo Fernandez looks like a really good player. He's just won a World Cup. I think he'll be good for those 8 years that he's there. Mikhailo Mudryk looks like a really promising talent, but he's been playing for Shakhtar Donetsk. It's not the biggest league to come from. It's going to be difficult, and if he doesn't live up to that expectation, it's going to be really difficult. And for the amount of players they brought in for the length of time they have, it could go horribly, horribly wrong for Chelsea. You could be looking in 5 years' time, those players could still be there, not in the team, earning the wages that they're on. It could come and prove me really, really wrong, but for the 8 years or 7 years that they're there, it could go horribly, horribly player-shaped. And it could come back to bite them. The fact that they've given such long contracts, the fact that they can run the contracts down. Some players will be happy just to earn a paycheck. If it gets to a point when Madueke's on like 200k a week, and then he starts to have a dip in form, it's going to be difficult to move him on because he's going to want to earn the same amount of money, but no clubs are going to want to pay those high wages, which is what we saw with the likes of Ronaldo and Paul Pogba trying to move them on. Nobody wanted to pay the ridiculous wages we had on. Alexis Sanchez being a prime example. We gave him a really long contract and 500k a week, and then no other club wanted to pay that fee, and then he just stayed at the club. So next is, to sum up, decent enough window for Chelsea. They've brought in a lot of promising talent, but there's a lot of potential for risk, and I do also think they should be investigating financial fair play. They are spending 600 million in the January window when most clubs struggle to even hit the 200 mil mark. If most clubs struggle to hit the 100 mil mark, they bring in 1 or 2 players, whereas they've brought in 7 players that are pretty much guaranteed first starters. So anyway, Liverpool, sort of January transfer window is made official in January transfer window. Cody Gakpo, stolen pretty much from Manchester United. we were looking at him in the summer. It never went through, and then we were going to reignite our interest in January and hopefully get that deal over the line. But Liverpool moved quicker, offered more money. They have had more success in recent years, so maybe that was a factor. And he took it. Fair enough, Manchester United move ridiculously slow at deals. De Jong being a prime example, we could have had that done in the first month of the window, but we just wanted it that little bit cheaper. And we ended up for Anthony, we had it for 40 mil, and then we wanted it less, and we ended up paying 100 and something for him, which is a ridiculous amount to pay. So they brought in Cody Gakpo. He hasn't looked the best for Liverpool. Obviously, you've got to allow an adjustment period coming from the Dutch league. Is a big jump to get playing regular first team football for Liverpool, a team that are struggling this season. He's now carrying the weight of them on his shoulders to be the attack. I mean, Salah's not been the best. Darwin Núñez has been really disappointing, so he's got to come in and do a job that nobody really wants to do. Luis Diaz came in and did a really good job, but Gakpo just hasn't been able to replicate that same form off the left. And with Gakpo, I think his trouble is just the midfield isn't good enough. The midfield for PSV Eindhoven would ping balls to him, and he'd take it and do it. With the Netherlands team, you got De Jong, Wijnaldum, Burgess that play the ball to him, and he can just get it on his chest and then do what he wants with it. Something which Liverpool maybe can't offer apart from Thiago. So it's difficult, and like I say, there is an adjustment period, like there's got to be with Darwin Núñez, but Liverpool don't want that adjustment period. They wanted him to have hit the ground running and just get on with it, really. On to Aston Villa. Now, really, the big story with Villa is that Danny Ings has left. He's joined another Claret and Blue club in West Ham. I think that's a good move for Danny Ings. If he helps them stay up, he'll have done really well. He'll be playing regular first team football, something which maybe can't get at Villa with Ollie Watkins being in good form at the minute. So it's disappointing for Villa because he did do all right for them, but I think in terms of his career where he's at the minute, West Ham's a good move. And also be playing in the Europa Conference League. Apologies. Which is good for the stage of his career he's at, and it might also get him some interest in the England team if he starts doing well or can pick up a trophy. They also brought in Alex Moreno from Real Betis at left back. Left mid, he can push forward quite a bit. I mean, they have got Luca Digne, but he's been a bit injury prone as of recent years, so bringing him in does make fiscal sense. Crystal Palace have brought in Nairo Amada from Stuttgart, centre mid, and they've also brought in Lokonga from Arsenal. Lokonga was not getting a look in on the team at Arsenal. He's a young lad, so he'll be wanting to play regular football, and if he does really well on his loan, he can come back to Arsenal and maybe start pushing for a first team spot, or just pushing for a cup spot, first team spot kind of thing. Get on the bench, get some regular game time, or this opportunity at Crystal Palace is to put him in the shop window because he'll be playing, so he can attract interest from other clubs, maybe attracting interest from Palace to make the move permanent. Time will tell. Nottingham Forest, the club that made 22 signings in the summer window, have gone and made another whole host of signings. They've brought in Danilo from Palmeiras, bit of a risky one, but he offers defensive stability. Chris Wood from Newcastle, again, just a tall striker, which is how Newcastle play on the counter-attack. They lump balls into the box. Chris Wood can get his head on one of them. He'll do well from Newcastle on loan. Wasn't getting a look in on the Newcastle team, so wants regular game time. They brought in centre-back Felipe from Atletico Madrid. I am really surprised by Felipe and another signing that I'll get onto in a minute. Felipe going from Madrid to Nottingham Forest really does baffle me a little bit because he was getting in the Atletico Madrid team. Maybe it's just a thing of he wanted to playing the Premier League before he called it a day and retired. So he's here for a year at least. And I think he will offer quite a bit for Nottingham Forest. He will offer experience. He will offer maturity. He will offer defensive solidity, which Forest need if they want to, stay out of the relegation zone and stay up in the Premier League. They also brought in Jonjo Shelvey from Newcastle, which again baffles me. He's getting guaranteed European football with Newcastle, but he's gone to play for Nottingham Forest. Now he's at the stage in his career, like I said earlier, early 30s, where he doesn't need regular game time. He needs to be playing at the highest league possible, and Nottingham Forest is not the highest league possible in the greatest of respects. So I'm confused by that move. I really am. They've brought in Keylor Navas on loan from PSG. Now again, Keylor Navas wasn't getting a look in on the PSG side with the signing of Donnarumma, so that makes sense. He wants to be regular game time. He's one of the best keepers in the world, and he was really good at Real Madrid. They brought in Courtois, he became second choice. He left PSG, played really well at PSG. They bring in Donnarumma, becomes second choice. And Donnarumma became first choice. Keylor Navas is too good to be second choice, and he's going to be first choice at PSG, which again I think is a bit of a shame for Dean Henderson. He's been alright this season, and he's going to go down second choice because you can't not play Keylor Navas if you're Nottingham Forest. I think with the signing of Keylor Navas and the signing of Felipe, I think Nottingham Forest will stay up in the Premier League this season, because that's given them a whole. It's taken them to another level defensively, and I can see the number of goals conceded. They currently sit on 35. I can't see that going above 60. I can't. There's 17 games left of the season. I can't see them conceding 20 goals, 25 goals with Felipe and Navas. I might be completely wrong, but that's just from my perspective. I can't see them conceding that level of goals. Next on to Leicester. They haven't brought in the amazing amount of people. They brought in, obviously, Tete, who did score against Aston Villa in the 4-2 game. Brilliant game. He scored in that game. With the current situation in Ukraine, he is allowed to sign little loans, 6-month loans with clubs. In case the issue is resolved, he can come back and play for the team. But for the time being, he's allowed to sign little deals with clubs to keep his regular game time up. So he's technically a free agent, but he's still contracted to Shakhtar Donetsk in Ukraine. So he can sign the little loans, come into Leicester. It's good for him. He is getting on a little bit now, but he can still improve his game completely, really. On to West Ham United. The only signing they brought in was obviously Danny Ings, that we did talk about earlier. Good move for both clubs, I think. West Ham in that relegation battle, which is really surprising to say they're playing in the Conference League this season. Really surprising. I think that for West Ham, they need to start picking up points. It's not a term of they want to, it's they need to. They've got to start picking up points, because they can't be. I think they'll go far in the Conference League because of the quality of opponents that are in there with them. But then if they get relegated or do really poorly but can pick up a Conference League medal and play in the Europa League because of winning that, I think they'll be in a really bad position, actually, because the squad will be despaired. They'll maybe lost some players, because if they get relegated, Declan Rice leaves, Paqueta leaves. I think Cresswell would go, Bowen goes, all of them go for cut rate prices, because they're too good to play in the Premier League, to play in the Championship, and West Ham would want to get some money to rebuild and build a squad that is capable of competing again. And I think, if Declan Rice goes in the summer for a cut rate price, I think he leaves anyway. But if they get relegated and he leaves for 40 million, that's a massive loss for West Ham. If they stay up, can go for 100 million plus, because he is that good a player. On to Leeds. The only really big signing is Weston McKennie from Juve on loan. Looks like a good, promising midfield talent. Obviously, Juve have had their share of troubles this season with the point deductions. They currently sit like in the bottom half of Serie A, which is ridiculous to say. They went 9 years in a row winning the Scudetto, and now they sit possibly in a relegation fight because they're looking at getting 20 points also deducted now, which would put them on 3 points in bottom spot. And if they get relegated to Serie B, that would be absolutely awful for Juventus. And I think letting Weston McKennie go is quite a dangerous decision because he gives them that midfield depth. And I don't mean depth as in he sits deep. I mean depth as in if there's an injury, he can pick up. He can pick up that place and start playing. But I think for Leeds it's a good decision because he's played in the Champions League, he's won things in Italy, and Leeds are not in the best position. And again, he offers depth for Leeds, something which they need. Everton have not made any moves in the transfer window, apart from obviously letting Anthony Gordon go, as we previously talked about. So Anthony Gordon going, again, for me is quite surprising because they need to stay up, and I think he's one of those players that can pick up points in games, something which they're going to have lost now. Obviously, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Dwight McNeil look like good players, and they've got the likes of Townsend and Maupay that look good on paper, but have underperformed and are grossly inconsistent throughout their whole time playing football. I think they should have brought in players. With Sean Dyche obviously coming in, he came in quite late towards the end of the window, but he could have brought in some people that match his ethos. Obviously, he's got Tarkowski that was at Burnley with him, but he still needs players that match his style of play. And I think they could have maybe met with him before signing his as a manager and saying, who do you want? Who do you like the look of? We'll get him in, get him over the line, and then integrate them in the squad as quickly as possible. And I know they beat Arsenal, but that is part of the new manager bounce, the honeymoon period. And with the likes of Sean Dyche coming in, they need to start picking up points, and I think that can only be done if the manager's allowed to have his own looking on the team and his own look at what he wants to bring his own style of players in, and they just haven't done that for him, which I think could come back to bite them. Next is Bournemouth. They brought in Matthias Viña from Roma, Semenyo from Bristol, Randolph from West Ham, Jack Stevens came in the summer, so that's not apparent. And a couple of other youngsters, Zabayani and Hamed Traore from Sassuolo and Dinamo Kiev, respectively. I think Bournemouth, those aren't good enough signings. Viña looks like a promising player. Randolph is Premier League proven, wasn't getting in the West Ham team, so that makes sense for him. He's got to get guaranteed game time at Bournemouth. And yeah, so again, I was never going to expect, Bournemouth to sign Kylian Mbappe, but there's a way of which transfer windows should be conducted, and it's bringing in players that match the style of play, and they just haven't done that. And, when you're in the position you're in the relegation zone, you've got to make changes. I mean, Forest aren't in the relegation zone. They're in the relegation battle for sure, but they're not in the relegation zone, and they need to be picking up those all vital points. I know these clubs have limited money, but they still need to be bringing in players. I mean, Southampton is completely carried by Ward-Prowse, so they maybe need to bring in someone to cover his position so he can get a rest in the games where they're not likely to pick up points. When they play City, they're not likely to pick up points, so why would you play Ward-Prowse? You can always pick up points, but what's the risk? Whereas if you then play Bournemouth for Southampton, that's points you can pick up. and you want to be playing your star players. At Southampton, again, they brought in Onuachu, Sulemana, James Bree, Carlos Alcaraz, and Mislav Orsic, who does look like a player. Obviously, was part of the 3-3 or the 3-0 against Tottenham in the Conference League a couple of seasons ago. And scored a hat-trick to knock Tottenham out of that competition. And now he's obviously Southampton. That could be good for them. But for those last couple of clubs, they needed to do a lot more. You look at Chelsea. I know Southampton are never going to be spending at the level of Chelsea, but they could still be bringing in some players, bringing in players that offer more, and just bringing a change to the team, because it's obviously not been working. So yeah, those are all the clubs. I'm now just going to quickly touch on a couple of good players who I think are going to do really well. I think Enzo Fernandez is going to do really well. World Cup winner, youngster, a lot of promising talent, going to do really well. I think Mudryk is going to do really well, and I think those are the only two Chelsea players that are going to hit the ground running this season, towards the back end of the season. I think Cody Gakpo is going to turn it around. I really do. As much as I would like to at United, and I'm quite annoyed he isn't, I think he's going to turn Liverpool's season around. I think that Sabitzer is going to do really well in Eriksen's absence. He's going to be playing a lot of games. He's going to be thrown in at the deep end, and I think he's going to cope with it really well. Carried Leipzig for the whole time he was there. Was the best midfielder. Went to Bayern. Maybe wasn't the best midfielder, but still did a job. I think Jorginho is going to be a good option for Chelsea. He's not a guaranteed starter by any stretch, but he's a good option. And I think that... Keylor Navas, I think he's going to be good. Felipe, I think he's going to turn... Felipe and Navas are going to absolutely turn the season around. McKennie, I think he's going to come into Leeds and do a job. Anthony Gordon, I think he's going to come and do a job for Newcastle. He's going to come in and push them towards the Champions League football they so desperately want. Oh, one thing I completely forgot to mention about Manchester City, João Cancelo. What happened there? João Cancelo was Liverpool's brightest player for such a long amount of time and performed really well game in, game out for them, and now he's gone. I think it is something. Pep claims that it's because he didn't get enough game time. I think that's a load of rubbish. I think he has had a falling out with Pep. I think obviously the season's not been necessarily going to plan. They are second in a good position, but the dominance that City have shown is not being shown this season. I think that they want to look at bringing in a left back in the summer, because as good as Nathan Ake's been, I don't think he's the permanent solution. I think he will move permanently in the summer to Bayern Munich or someone like Barcelona, Real Madrid, something like that. And yeah, it's really surprising that João Cancelo's gone. It was just something at the start of the window that I never expected. I just assumed he was injured, rightly or wrongly, and he's just gone, which is a big shock. It's something which I never expected. So yeah, that's my thoughts on this January transfer window. If you would like me to talk about anything for next week, I'm going to be trying to do these once every Monday. So if you have got anything you'd like me to talk about, please do leave it in the comments below. Leave your thoughts on this podcast. Who do you think's been the best at signing this window? Who do you think's been the worst signing? Who's going to do really well? Not really well? Rate each club's transfer window out of 10. Let me know. I'll leave a link to all my socials if you want to get in contact with me about anything. And leave your thoughts about what you want me to talk about next. And I'm going to chuck in a song. Hope you enjoy.